were with us in January know that one of the hot topics that we talked about was change management and how to better build change management into your training and what the importance is. So we're really pleased to have Paige come and talk to us. I've been fortunate to work with Paige a number of years at Abbott Laboratories in a past position of mine. Paige actually is a change management guru at Abbott. In fact, not only does she have some certification from LaMarche, but she also helped create the change management program at Abbott. In fact, when I worked on Paige's team, she was actually going all around the world to talk to people about change management. Now, when I took the job, I was actually supposed to be traveling, and then someone decided she liked to travel. But that's another story.
Let's see what happens
and see what happens. So, let me turn this over to Paige then, who is going to talk to us about change management.
There wasn't much luck with the mic earlier, but let's hope it's fixed itself here. And if not, believe me, I can yell. As my bio said, I have a 2-year-old. I can yell. All right. So thanks, Sue, for that introduction, and I think I met many of you before the talk. So it was a pleasure to meet you and to be here. I am happy to be here to talk about change management, but it's in a bit of a different spin than I'm used to doing. So I'm used to just talking about pure change management. What is it? What's the model? How do you help people really engage in change? But today there's a bit of a different spin. So I'm talking about change management in terms of improving learning programs with change management. Okay? So what I really want to talk about is some of the concepts at Abbott that we use for change management and how they can help you with your learning programs. Before I start, just a couple of kind of logistical notes. I would like to ask that questions are held, just because I have a lot of material to cover, and what I find is when I allow questions during the presentation, a lot of times it's something I'm already going to touch on. So if you just kind of, if you think of a question, you might want to jot it down, and I'm hoping that there will be plenty of time at the end to field some questions. Okay? And then I'm more interested at this point for my own benefit to kind of get a feel for you in the audience in terms of kind of what roles we have represented here. So if you have something to do in your professional life with change management, raise your hand, please. All right, so that's probably a good half of the group. Okay, good. If you're more of sort of a training or a learning professional purely in that sort of respect, instructional design or training facilitation, that kind of thing, raise your hand. Okay, good. How about anything else that I didn't touch on in those two? Anything else? So everybody kind of, there's a couple of people who may fall under the anything else category. Barry, you're everything. All right, so that was just kind of for me to get a kind of feel for who's in the audience today. So I actually was a training professional first. When I joined sort of my training career at Abbott, it was about 10 years ago, and I really started my training career more as a training coordinator or a logistical sort of person, and I've sort of worked up through that. That was around probably the year 2000. In about 2006, 2007, was when I got involved in change management. And what I did was I took the role that I'm currently in. They wanted me to integrate change management into their business excellence programs. That was kind of the scope. So I was named a training manager in a business excellence group, but they really wanted me to integrate change management, because at that point it was kind of up and coming as the new hot topic, and they really saw the need for change management and business excellence, because BEX is all about change, right? So that was kind of why I took the role I'm in now. I started learning about it, I started integrating it, and that was when I saw the similarity of change management and learning. There's a lot of really key tie-ins, there's a lot of synergies. It's almost essentially kind of one and the same, and that's really what I wanted to kind of present tonight, are some of those concepts. Okay? All right, and if I continue to do feedback, if it's bothering anybody, I can, thank you, I did ask for some more. Oh, you know what, here, can I have this one? Thank you. If I do continue to have feedback, and if it's bothering anybody, let me know. I should be able to turn off the mic, but it's kind of reasonable now, do you think? And everybody can hear me okay? Okay, good. All right. So a little bit about Abbott. First of all, is there anybody in the room who has never heard of Abbott? Jenny? I'm never failing. That's my audience plan. No, so, just in case there was anybody who didn't know about Abbott, obviously we're a very large company, worldwide, market-leading pharmaceuticals, advanced medical products, trusted nutritionals. We are a diversified medical company. And guess what? We're splitting. Another big news flash for everybody, right? So we are going through a tremendous amount of change through various different projects. So we are splitting into two companies where the pharma group is going one way, the diversified medical is going another way. I'm part of pharma. You'll hear more about it in the news, I'm sure. But my objectives really for today, for the talk today, I want to talk a little bit more about the Abbott change model, which, as Sue said, I was part of sort of the development of the Abbott change model. We opted not to use a consultant. We wanted to kind of do our own model so we could do what we really wanted to with it and drive it how we needed to. And I want to talk about how that aligns with the ADDIE model. If you've never thought about the alignment of change management and ADDIE, again, there's a lot of alignment, very strong alignment. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to review some key concepts of change management as they relate to learning programs so you can kind of have that benefit of the tie-in there. Discuss how to use change management techniques, so things that we use within the change management model, how you can use those techniques to support and really drive learning. And then finally, everybody always talks about resistance as far as change is concerned. I want to talk about how to reduce resistance by using some change management sort of techniques in learning events specifically. Okay? So that's the main points that I want to cover. I'm going to have to talk fast. All right, so tell me, who in the audience has attempted this? It says, while the posters provided a low-cost alternative to formal change management, they inexplicably failed to get emotional buy-in. Hang up a poster, send some announcements, that's change management, right? There's a little more to it than that. Unfortunately, that's a lot of times what the senior management thinks is change management, but we all know there's a lot more that has to go into it. So I wanted to kick off with a little humor. Okay, audience engagement time. Pop quiz. Everybody loves an instructor that starts with a pop quiz, right? I wanted to just kind of throw out some questions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show each one of them. If you have something to write with, great, you can kind of jot down your answers. Otherwise, just sort of think of your answers, and then I'm just going to kind of ask for some volunteers to share their answers, okay? So pop quiz. What is change management? What is change management? When you hear the words change management, what does it mean to you? It means change your location. Step away from the mic. Anybody want to offer a little definition of change management for me? Okay.
How to help your team adjust to changes that are occurring in the organization.
Okay. Help your team adjust to changes occurring in the organization. What I like about that answer is it's about people. When you're talking about change management, you're talking about helping people through change. So many times in corporate America, we're really great at the process side of change, but not the people side. We need to help the people make the change that we need. So great, very good answer. How about this one? How would you assess the current state of change management in corporate America? A little more thought-provoking here.
I think it's misunderstood.
Okay, misunderstood in what respect?
Based on some things that you've already said, that we don't always, we think that it's about communicating the change of the process and not about helping people adjust to what's changing.
Okay, great, good. What else? Any other thoughts on the current state, Sue?
Well, I think we also don't think about the sustainability of anything, so we think about it as an event, and then we kind of step away and hope that it just sticks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so sustainability isn't often built into the plan, it's an afterthought. Okay. Jen?
I think corporate America thinks that it can be done quickly, and it can be done with little resources, and it's something that, oh, let's do change management, have something out next week. And that's goes with the misunderstanding of it, and also just in planning for it. It's not planning for it.
Good, not planned for, not thoughtfully planned for. Yeah, final answer?
It ignores the emotion and the psychology of the people that you're trying to get to change.
Very good. Yeah, it ignores the emotion and the psychology, definitely. There's a lot of psychological background that you have to consider and think about as you're driving change, and that's oftentimes not given much thought. So, great answers, good. How about this? Does your company have a change management manager, department, team? And when I say change management, I mean specifically change management. How many companies represented here have a change management team person? Not a whole lot, not a whole lot, okay? Interesting, and it kind of goes back to assessing the current state of change management in corporate America, doesn't it?
And how many of them do 17 other things as well?
Exactly, yeah, not just pure change management, 8 million other things. How does that team, for those of you that raised your hand, I'm just kind of curious, how does that team interface with your training organization? And I know Jenny can answer that question.
The same, that's one of the same.
Okay? How about some of the other people? You
They're
raised your
definitely under like the same umbrella. I mean, they work with the same people. I mean, they have separate change people, but they're always working together.
Okay, so separate people, but always kind of synergizing and working together, sort of thing. Okay, good, 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 good. Final question for our little first pop quiz. What is the most important concept in change management?
Communication.
Okay, so we said communication, I heard the people. What else? Emotion. Anything else?
Expect resistance and work with it.
Okay, expect resistance and work with it.
Maybe the reason why it's necessary.
Why is it necessary? What are we trying to do here, right? I saw a hand back here.
Well, actually have change and lasting change, which is what you want to do with learning.
The end result is kind of lasting change, right? Okay, Derek?
Timing is to when you incorporate the concept into what's going on in your organization.
Absolutely. Timing is critical, critical. That's actually a piece of my other change management presentation. If you try to change, if you try to shove change down people's throats and you're hitting it at the wrong time, you might as well not even be doing it. Is this bothering people? Should I take it out? I think I can do it without. I'll just yell. My husband will appreciate this. I won't have a voice when I get home. He will like that. All right. Hey, stop laughing, men. All right. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about change at Abbott, the way we look at change at Abbott. And you know, if there's one thing that I learned as I was studying LaMarche and a couple of different models and all that, honestly, if you've seen one change model, they're all fairly common. They might look a little different graphics, a little different monikers, that sort of thing, but really they are fairly similar. So this will probably look similar to you. Planned change is when you have a present state that looks a certain way. In this case, we have a green circle that is our present state, right? And then you have a desired state that looks different and feels different from your present state. So in this case, we've got a green square. Probably should have been an orange square, something much different, right? Because usually big change, planned change is pretty large. And then, of course, in the middle of that, between the present and the desired, you've always got what we call a transition state. That's where you get the pain of change. That's where you really have to help the people understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, and help them as much as you possibly can along the way. So this is really just kind of the basic model of what we consider planned change. So as I said, Abbott does have a change model. And again, probably looks fairly similar to any change model. I could talk about this model probably for a good few hours. I am not going to, of course, just to spare you the details. But I wanted to at least point out a few things here. First of all, this is a cyclical model. This is not linear. It is not step-by-step. It does have steps included in it, but it is a continual process, and you're always kind of jumping back and forth and revisiting different phases and that sort of thing based on the change you're working with. Okay? The other important thing here is the brownish circle that the model is included in is the culture of any organization. You cannot plan change in the absence of understanding the culture and working with the culture. The people are part of the culture. And unless you have that understanding and you're able to really kind of make that linkage for them, you're going to miss out completely. So you really, really have to consider the culture. And sometimes change is even, about changing the culture. You talk about a difficult change. Changing a culture is a huge and very difficult change. But this whole model is really a part and needs to be part and parcel with the culture. Okay? There's various phases of this model. Assess, diagnose, and plan. And as Jenny said, that's usually the one that is the smallest, but it really should be the biggest. You have to spend a lot of time in the assess, diagnose, and plan to understand the change, to build the support for the change, to build your change plans, to understand your stakeholders. If you don't spend a good amount of time here, your change will probably not get off the ground really easily. Okay? So if there's one thing, I always say this when I talk about this model, if there's one thing I would change about this model, I would probably make that blue section really the big one. Okay. Implementing the change plan sounds easy, right? Oh yeah, just take your plan and implement it. Sure, easy. There's a lot of, that's where you meet with the resistance. That's where you're building the readiness, but that's where you meet with the resistance. So that's where we have a lot of tools within our Abbott model that we can use to help people through the change and to help them understand the change and make the change. And then finally, the evaluate and sustain piece. That's the piece that Sue mentioned that oftentimes is forgotten as well. So, if you really want to understand how well the change is doing and the sustainability, how long it's going to stick around, or are people just going to go right back to the old way of doing things? Very, very common. When change management isn't used, this is kind of the phase to do that. So again, there's a lot more to this model, but I did want to talk through at least those basics. And if you know anything at all about the ADDIE model, we've got a lot of training professionals in the room who I'm sure are very familiar with that. There is definitely a direct linkage between any kind of change model and the ADDIE model. And here's what I mean by that. So the assess, diagnose, and plan, kind of the first part of our model, really aligns with analyze, design, and develop. You're defining the need for the training program. You're planning your solution, designing what that needs to be. And then finally, in the development phase, you're creating that solution. So that's really that first blue piece. That's the planning piece and the building piece, right? The next one, our circle in the model is green under the implement change plan. That's really kind of the combination of finalizing your development and your implementation. So delivering the solutions, getting the people engaged, delivering the training, facilitating the workshops, all of those things. And then finally, evaluate and sustain is a direct alignment with the evaluate phase, track and review success. So if you haven't really thought about this, and actually I thought about it when Sue called me, I'm like, there's a huge tie-in. These models are almost essentially one and the same, which means that a lot of the concepts that we use with change management can also be used with learning and with training, okay? So, some key change management concepts then, that as I talk through these, what I want you to do is literally think about, okay, she's talking about change management, but I'm a learning or a training person. How can I kind of associate the two to build better training programs? All right, so here we go. In change management, there must be some sort of dissatisfaction with the current state. When you're talking about learning, somebody needs to know something different, do something different. They're not satisfied with their level of knowledge, they need something more. There's a clear vision of the future state. This is critical in change. This is one of the pitfalls in change management. If you do not have a clear vision of where you want your people to be in the future state, it's almost impossible to get there, right? So in learning, you really need to have a clear vision of that end state. That's how you build great objectives, right? So having that insight into what you really want the people to get out of the learning activity is a huge key. There's support for the future state. In change management, we call that sponsorship. And if we don't have effective sponsorship, we don't have change. You need the high-level people to get up there and talk the talk and walk the walk and that sort of thing. So for training, you need sponsors as well. You need sponsors to be out in front of people saying this is an important topic. This is something we need you to have as a skill, as a development opportunity, etc. There's a clear need for change in knowledge, skills, or behavior. That's the definition of training, for goodness sakes. And we look at that in change management as well. There is a need in the future state for doing something different, knowing something different, behaving somehow differently. Okay? Sue likes this one. Resistance is human nature. And I say that because in training, you don't always have audiences that are willing participants, right? When I was in HR training years ago at Abbott, it never happens? Wow. When I was in HR training years ago at Abbott, we used to do core competency training. Okay, we have core competencies at Abbott, and we wanted, as we were rolling out the Performance Excellence Program, we wanted people to truly understand why and how and all that stuff. I would have people come into my sessions and open a newspaper and read. Really? But you know what? What that is it's poor sponsorship. Nobody's really telling them the importance of why they're here and what they need to be doing and why they're learning this and why is this good here at Abbott and why are we expecting this of you. So we really need that. And resistance, you kind of got to expect it, but guess what? If you build some of these things into your training, you should have better engagement and you should have less resistance. That's what we're hoping. And resistance can be overcome. Oh, that's when kids start dancing. This is a dance show too. The success of change can be measured. I think they're ringtones. The success of change can be measured. The success of learning can be measured, right? Okay? It's a little bit different beast because you can't always see change happening. It's not always as easy to see learning or to see growth and opportunity and development, but both can truly be measured in that whole evaluate and sustain piece. And finally, I think I already touched on this one, the change model is not linear and neither is the learning model. It's continuous. You need continuous support. You have to always come back around with more, with better, with continuous support for people. That's really similar to both change management and training. Okay, a couple of change management techniques, and again, this is based on kind of how Abbott manages change that I really feel could be beneficial to learning programs. So I'm just going to kind of lump these all together. So stakeholder analysis. Stakeholders are anybody that have anything to do with change. So it could be people who just kind of need to know about it. It could be people you're trying to help drive the whole change. It could be sponsors who are speaking about it, who are out there and preaching about it. In either case, change management and or learning, stakeholders are key. You really have to understand and assess your audience. I have been a part of learning programs where there was clearly no audience assessment whatsoever, and it just misses the mark. You can literally see the glazed over look in people's eyes. You realize right then that you completely missed the mark with your audience. You don't understand their needs. You don't even understand how to get to them. You really have to understand your stakeholders for learning to be successful. Plan for multiple learning styles. I probably didn't do the greatest presentation here because I got a lot of words, not a lot of pictures, not a little bit of interactivity. But you really have to meet all of the learning styles in the room. Some people are visual, some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic. You have to design around all of those things to really make the training stick and really make it be impactful. And really, if you can, once you assess your audience, if you can really target your program to that audience when possible, that's when you're going to get the most retention and the most learning. Because if you're not targeting to the audience, again, you're going to miss the mark, you're going to miss it completely. Let's just say you're speaking to a room full of scientists, and you're using kind of that, 8th grade level comprehension. They're going to be so bored to tears, you're not even going to come close to connecting with them. So really, take the time to do a little bit of stakeholder analysis before you design and before you teach, bless you, to someone, because you really will hit the mark a lot more there. Communication plans. Communication plans are a huge piece of change management. Someone even mentioned that when I asked about the important pieces here. How does that relate to learning? Take the opportunity to market your programs. And then obviously in different companies, different environments, that means different things. You know, you guys actually do a great job of marketing. You use the website, you use videos, you have flyers, all that kind of stuff. Take the time to design that stuff and really get it out there so people are aware of what this is, why they're going, what they're going to learn, that sort of thing. I always like to assess opportunities to communicate both before and after. So you think of the before stuff as sort of that push communication to get people interested and get people involved. The after piece is really where you get the sustainability. You can do post-coaching sessions, you can do post-book discussions, you can pull people back together in a couple of weeks to see how they're applying what they've learned. Those post opportunities are, to me, even more important than the pre kind of stuff, because that's where you are getting the continuous learning. And as people are letting things sink in, they're understanding even more questions they might want to answer or what additional support they'll need. So that's really a key piece. And finally, in terms of communication, do not oversell your programs. And I think there's a really fine line. You want to get people excited, you want people to be coming to your sessions, that sort of thing. But if you kind of overpromise what they're really going to get out of this, that word will get out and you're going to kind of lose credibility for that. So don't oversell. Say great things, but really make sure you can kind of keep the promises in terms of what you're going to deliver there. And then finally, evaluation. Okay. One of the things that I did in an earlier training position, we were really trying to figure out how impactful the training was, right? So, you know, we were doing all these post evaluations and getting, you know, great smile sheets and all that, but really, does that tell you how much people are truly learning? No. So we do a little bit of sort of a pre-test kind of thing and then a post-test and then even further down the road post-test. Take the opportunity to understand where they're at now, what they've learned in the program, what they might even need to continue to learn. Really ask your audience that question. Instead of trying to figure it out yourself, ask them that question. See what they need from you. Be willing to make modifications. When things don't go right with change management, we take a step back and go, you know what, we're not hitting the mark here. What did we do wrong? Did we misunderstand some stakeholders? Did we not understand the vision that we're trying to communicate? Be willing to make modifications to your learning programs if they're not working. And I know with version control, that's a huge pain and all that stuff, but you really have to be willing to make those modifications if you're not hitting the mark. And if you're not going to listen, somebody finish my statement, please.
Yes.
Thank you. So much with evaluations, you know, if you're not going to take the time to review them, really take some action around them in terms of your learning programs, don't even bother asking. You'll kill your credibility, you'll lose your audience. There's a lot of really bad things that happen with surveys, unintentionally, but just think about how you're truly using that evaluation time period, what you're going to do with it in the end. All right, let's talk a little bit about resistance. This is the infamous change curve, or as LaMarche coined the term, dip in the delta. How many people have heard that? Okay, all right, a few, good. So basically what this says is anytime you have a change, it doesn't matter how much change management you do, you're always going to have a slight dip in performance. It's the learning curve, right? It's human nature. People have to learn what they don't know. They need a little time to practice, right? It's that human nature piece. But you actually can help the change curve along with change management, purely by helping people understand why are they here, what are they going to get out of it, supporting the learning with that pre and post stuff we talked about. So what I've put here is this is a little graph. The upper part of the axis is adaptation and support for change, and then the lower part is time. So as you move along with time, you're always going to have that adaptation, right? But you can help people get from awareness, which is, oh yeah, I've heard of that program. I know it's out there. Okay. And by using some of these change management, communication techniques, that kind of thing, you can move them along to the next level up is a bit more of an understanding. Well, it sounds like this program is supposed to change the way that I do my work. Maybe something I might want to look into. Acceptance is that next level. level. So I believe the program is really integral to carry out my job and to be able to do this better. And then finally, the commitment level. I know the value delivered by the program. It's a regular part of how I do my work. This is really necessary for me. The way that you move people along this curve, again, back to those change management techniques. You understand your audience, you deliver the right message, you involve people in the design, in the facilitation, you get them actually participating in this. You have your sponsors talking about the benefit of the program, that sort of thing. You have your sponsors sitting in the room, in the programs, okay? So there's various ways to really help people along this change curve, and the benefit of this is ultimately, as people are moving up this, and if you can get them to move up this fairly quickly, you have them really accepting what they need to, and usually they're starting to talk really well about it too, so they're kind of sharing it with their colleagues. So really the point here is, there is always going to be a change curve, there's always going to be that dip in the delta, but you can really help people through that. A little bit more on overcoming resistance in terms of a few buckets here. Sponsorship. Involve the right people at the right time. If you don't have the right sponsors who are passionate about what you're doing and who are willing to get up in front of people and talk highly about it and really drive that vision, if those sponsors aren't committed, it's either time to get a new sponsor or it's time to plan for failure, honestly. Now that's in the pure change management state. When you're talking about the learning state of things, yes, it's great to have sponsors and it's great to have their engagement. That's beneficial. You probably won't completely fail without that. But really, in terms of change management, if your sponsors who have been deemed sponsors for a certain change can't get up there and can't walk the walk and talk the talk, it's going to be a real struggle for anybody else to. Okay? Communication, again, targeted messages. So when you're talking about communicating training, if you can literally do sort of a stakeholder analysis, understand your audience, and then perhaps have multiple sort of messages and ways to get those messages out there, not just one sort of generic flyer that's supposed to be the be-all, end-all for this, right? Really target those messages to the various audiences. You might want to change the message, you might want to change the wording, you might want to add some things to it, okay? Let me ask you this question, and this is really back to the pure change management side of things. What happens when there is no communication about a change, for instance? People make things up, they create their own realities, right? And most of the time, if not all the time, those are a heck of a lot worse than the real reality. So what we always try to coach our sponsors with is, it's scary to share information. The information you are able to share, do it as much as you can and as honestly as you can. Because if you don't, it'll be a lot worse in the end. People will make things up. There's rumors, there's speculation, the rumor mill. That thing works quicker than anything. I don't have it, honestly. Involvement. If you can find the naysayers, if you can find the people who are speaking poorly about your training programs and get them somehow engaged and involved, make them be a facilitator, for goodness sakes. That's the quickest way to bring somebody on board, get them passionate, and turn them into a complete yes person, okay? Now, it takes the right person to be able to do that, and it's a little harder than it sounds, but if you can involve the naysayers, you're going to be well ahead of the curve. And in terms of, again, inviting people to be a facilitator, to be an expert panelist. We had a program that has morphed a little bit at Abbott called Abbott New Leader. And the best part of that program, by far, when we looked at the evaluations, we would bring in former students who were then kind of seasoned leaders and have them just sit up and talk about their experiences and answer questions and be very candid about things. That was the part of that program that got the highest marks. If you can involve people as expert panel people, as guest speakers, as book circle hosts, things like that, that's where the learning really comes in. It's not just a person that's brought in to be a facilitator. It's a person that's there, that has that experience, that has the background, and can share that. And then finally, again, ongoing learning. This is the piece that really hits home. Follow-up sessions, coaching, resource centers where people can actually get to information as they need it, whether it be through SharePoint or some kind of a portal or whatever. That ongoing learning, and I just read an article today, as a matter of fact, I pulled up an email and read an article today about this. The ongoing learning is where the highest percentage of learning really happens. It's not in the classroom, it's the ongoing sustainment sort of piece that really hits home with people. So think about how you can design that into your learning. In change management, we have some tools for sustainability and involvement and all that stuff, but in learning, you can actually structure that into your programs. All right, final pop quiz. This is it, I'm wrapping up. I want to know, from a good sampling of people here, how will you use at least one thing you heard me talk about today to improve your learning programs? Any ideas? Who can think on the fly? That's what I want.
Well, I think the integration of the two disciplines is key, and that you can't really talk about one without the other.
Very true. Yeah. Yep. So when you've got change management, you've got learning and vice versa, and starting to talk about them more as one and the same. Good. Good.
We just had a new program that we've implemented. I work in a environment that's kind of call center, and the CEO keeps getting frustrated. She does this learning with our staff, and they don't get it, and then she's constantly frustrated that she has to keep going back and retrain. So I'm going to go meet with her and present to her some of your concepts, so she'll stop being as frustrated.
Excellent. Good. Good. Building some of the change management stuff. Good. Thank you. Good. What else? What else did you learn today that you want to kind of go back and play with a little bit?
Make your opponent your ally.
Ah, good. Yes, absolutely. Easier said than done, but a very, very beneficial thing if you can do it. How about this side of the room? Somebody over here?
I know it's easy to use the last thing you said, but when you mentioned that the highest marks in the new leader program were from past grads who were current leaders, it made me think of a training I was just involved in where it was 2 days of highly designed out, developed training, and then in the middle of it, the board, the chairman of the board wanted to come in and just address, these were managing directors, and the chairman of the board wanted to come in for 45 minutes, just talk about what it's like to be the chairman of the board of a public company. That was off the charts, the best received part of it.
Yep.
And that idea of like getting it from the horse's mouth, even though you don't control and meticulously design that piece, can be the most rewarding for the learner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. Okay. All right, so let me just go to my final slide. This is a slide that gets rave reviews every time I present change management. And again, back to the pure change management side of things, but think about how this also applies to learning. So in order to have really successful, really impactful change, you need to have a whole array of things. You need to have the vision. You need to have the right skills. You need to have the support for the change. You need to have the resources, and you need to have an action plan. Okay? In the absence of any of these pieces, you're going to create a bit of a different environment. So in the absence of a vision, you're going to end up with a lot of confusion because people have no idea what it is they're trying to get to, right? In the absence of the right skills, you have anxiety. People are expected to perform at a certain level in a certain way. If they don't have those skills, it's a scary place to be. In the absence of support, you've only got sporadic change because maybe over here the manager is great and supports the whole thing and things are taken off like wildfire, and over here they don't have the support they need. They don't even know what they are supposed to be doing. So you've got sporadic change in that case. In the absence of resources, and resources in this case could mean money, could mean people, could mean time, you've got a lot of frustration. When you don't have the resources you need to do the right thing, you get frustration. And finally, if you don't have some kind of an action plan, in our case, in our model, we actually have a change plan that we integrate with the overall project plan. You're going to have a lot of false starts because people just don't know where they're supposed to start, what they're supposed to be doing, what comes next, when it's happening. Okay? So I think this is a really great graphic. It says a lot, and this is from Linkage. I got to give the credit where credit is due. Linkage came up with this, but I really think it's a great wrap-up for a talk like this. So, all right. So that was it. I don't know how I did on timing, but I hope to have time for some questions if anybody has anything they'd like to ask or talk about or even just throw out there for discussion.
Paige, thank you. You mentioned ongoing learning, that you just read an article on this. If there's a way in your labyrinth of information, if you could get that article to us so we can hoist it on the website?
Okay, yep, let me see if I can dig it back out and find it, yeah. And I don't know how to get it to stop. Yeah, no, it was a very insightful thing, so I'll look for it. Thank you.
So one of the things that you talked about was having good stakeholders, good sponsors rather. And so oftentimes I see sponsors that think they are good sponsors, but they really aren't. They're really not engaged. And I know you've had some experience with that. So how have you dealt with truly engaging those sponsors?
That's tough. That's a really tough situation, especially when they're very high-level sponsors, perhaps directors, VPs, presidents, that sort of thing. You know, I really think a lot of times there's misunderstanding of what's needed in a sponsor and what we're trying to do in terms of change management. So a lot of times it's just sitting down and having kind of a heart-to-heart with that person and kind of laying some things out, answering any questions they have, providing you as a resource. You know, you're the one driving this change, but you can't do it without them. I find those kind of one-on-one, heart-to-heart talks very, very powerful. I think the other thing you can do is leverage advocates of theirs. So a lot of times what I'll try to do is find a kind of a key person to that person and talk about, well, what might be the issue or what might be the questions or the hesitation there to a person who really knows this person. And, you know, get some insights there for what you could perhaps do to help move that person along. But it's so critical. That is one of the most dangerous pitfalls of change management. If you can't get the sponsors on board and you just can't get to that person, this is a direct quote from a former change manager at Abbott. Plan to either find new sponsors or plan for failure. That's how critical it is. So it's worth the time spent. Yes?
You mentioned about the stakeholder analysis. And in my experience, when you start to analyze that, you could come up with so many different stakeholders that have a stake or impacted or affected by it. Mm-hmm. How do you begin to manage them, get them represented, not be left out? Because if you leave someone out, they don't get informed, that could be the one that comes around and bites you.
Yeah. Well, then that's why the analysis is so important, and we do spend a good amount of time. We've got an actual tool where there's different columns that we fill out about the person, about where they are today, about, you know, some struggles they might have, the challenges, some advocates they might have. So I think it's important to spend the time to do that, and then as a result of that, branches out your communication plan, your training plan, your sustainability plan. So you're building everything. It's almost like the stakeholder analysis is the cornerstone, and everything gets built from that. And if you do it that way, you don't risk missing, you know, certain individuals or really key people, because you're really developing and building everything from that. Okay? Jen?
So I know we talked earlier, and you mentioned today as well, that the planning and the design and the kind of the analysis piece is really the biggest piece. And many times that's the piece that you get from your sponsor or your organization saying, this needs to be done today. Stakeholder analysis, we already talked about who this takes care of. We're not going to sit down and do that full piece. So what are some tactics that you use to try and help elongate as much as possible that time? Because if you don't have the right analysis, you don't have the right planning time, it will fail.
Yeah. I think you have to look at the big picture in that case. In other words, if there really is a business reason that somebody has to do something and do it fairly quickly, at least they're doing it. So you have to kind of look at your pros and cons. You can walk them through a quicker version of the stakeholder analysis. You can, take little snippets of their time as much as possible, do some things under the radar on your own, or talking with other people as much as you can to not necessarily involve them, come back to them with that final result. But I think, the real trick is, and I still haven't found the silver bullet for this one, how do you truly convince people that the more time spent on this stuff is the more beneficial part of it? And if any of you find that silver bullet, please let me know. Because at Abbott, and I think in corporate America, it's always, do it the quickest, do it the most succinct you can, because we've got to get on with this. We've got to start doing things. I think the other thing is when you have situations where you're able to take the time to do that, you can kind of use those as case studies and say, listen, we did a half-day session, and here's what we ended up with. It's so much more beneficial than me and you trying to kind of having a half-an-hour meeting and trying to hash this thing out. So, again, the response I had to you earlier is as you have those wins And as you are successful with getting people to understand what you're doing and taking the time to do it, more people will really see that and hopefully learn more.
What are the greatest challenges that you've experienced with mobile and virtual workforces as you're trying to implement change, and what are some of the best
Time zones. Yeah, no, you know, it's honestly, it's just getting everybody together so that they can hear the same message at the same time in a consistent format. And, you know, I'll tell you, I'm not the most technically savvy person, so that's why I took the flyer for your next topic. I know I'd love to some tips and tricks on that myself, but it really is. It's getting everybody together in the same place so they can hear that consistent message. They can all be part of the discussion. They can feel engaged and involved. But when you've got anyone from Australia to Japan to California on a line, you tell me what the best time to do that is. It's, you know, it really comes down to that. It really does. And I'm looking forward to being able to utilize technology. We're doing a lot more recording type things now. And it's not always as good as live because you don't have the interaction, but at least it's better than sending something to PowerPoint. Okay. Yeah.
Where are you going with respect to incentives with respect to the change plan?
That's a touchy subject because a lot of times, and actually on the slide deck here, I'm trying to think. We have this worded a little bit differently where something instead of resources, it literally had some kind of monetary connotation. We try to take that away as much as possible. We want to incentivize people, but we don't want them to take money right off the bat. We're trying to kind of make that jump and that transition. I think now what we're trying to do is incentivize people with the involvement and perhaps the act of being a sponsor or a change agent or a facilitator, that sort of thing. That's really what we're trying to drive, you know, being a part of something big, being part of a team that's driving a tremendous change for Abbott, that sort of thing. That's really the incentives that we're trying to push. Disincentives, you know, that's an even tougher call, honestly. You would hope that a disincentive is to have people who aren't included and start feeling out of the loop. I don't know. It's a great question.
That's where managers can come in too to help support.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, that's a part of the culture too, right? Because if you don't understand the culture and understand what works in terms of incentives and that sort of thing, you can go terribly wrong with incentives. It's a little bit of a dangerous option. Okay, I've been given the one more question cue by Sue. So we'll take the one hand up over here.
I hope it's okay. It is a generic question, but just Sue mentioned you as a guru, and you talked about an article that you read. I was wondering if you could just tell us, like, what are the 5 to 10 information sources you scan to have a perspective on learning?
Anything that comes into my inbox? No, I'm kidding. I'm always looking for more of these sort of the interactive sort of groups that I can be part of. As a matter of fact, somebody here, and I have a card, told me about a group that I could join on LinkedIn. Okay, yes, I'm very interested in that. So I will be looking into that as well. So, you know, I'm a decent person as far as reading is concerned, but I like to be involved and I like to call into things and I like to kind of that social aspect of things. So, you know, I can't really necessarily name anything off the top of my head. I'm a proponent of any kind of Cotter change books on the basis of change, that sort of thing. But, you know, when it comes down to it, it's more the interactive stuff that I really get into to be a part of. Today, I've learned a lot from all of you just listening to some of your challenges and some of the things that you're looking for. So that's really what I thrive on, honestly. And unfortunately, I don't have time to go to seminars and stuff right now, but I will get back into that.
Thank you, Paige. You can sit down and finish your dessert now.
Oh, sure.
Take it home with you.
This is my incentive right here, John.
So thank you all for coming. I definitely appreciate it. I hope that you got a lot out of this. A couple quick things is don't forget that in June we have both a workshop that's going to be going into more of the social media and how to really use that in your training, as well as a clinic, which is similar to what this is, although it's not quite as formal. It's a little bit more programming, so about 2 hours of programming. So imagine 2 hours of Paige versus 1 hour of Paige would have been so much better. And then in July, we actually have someone that's going to be coming from McDonald's and talking to us a little bit about performance management and some of the things that they're doing at McDonald's. Maybe some samples, I don't know. So what I did want to do is kind of end this by thanking everyone for coming, thanking Kara for sponsoring tonight. We appreciate that.